quick note here as we begin. As far as I can tell, there are no pictures of the cafe that exist. So, in order to give you something to look at instead of just a black screen while I'm talking, I will insert pictures of historical cafes that I found online or just pictures of the siblings at different times in their lives. Just note these might not be correct with the timeline. And I'll probably even throw in an AI video or picture too. Having said that, here we go. The cafe. From the early 1930s until after World War II, the family cafe played a major role in all of the Walkers' life, young and old. Judd's dad, Hiram, was the original owner of the cafe, but we don't really have any idea of when he opened it. During the Depression, business was so bad that the cafe barely remained open, which was why they moved to Brownfield. Then, during and after the war, business was so good they could hardly close the doors. Oh, and by the way, if Judd's mom, Mary Elizabeth, doesn't look super happy in this picture, it's probably because getting 5 boys cleaned, dressed, and to the photographer in 1895 was a massively frustrating adventure. Anyway, back to the cafe.
Granddad Walker owned the cafe, and Daddy ran it for him. And then Daddy left, we went to Brownfield. Then we came back, and Daddy bought the cafe from Granddad.
In the beginning, people came to the cafe on foot and on horse. Well, maybe not this horse.
There was a water tower and a vacant lot back out behind the cafe. They'd park their wagons out there. The street coming up to the cafe had hitching rails, all horses and wagons all in there.
During this time, the cafe had one of the world's first horse-ups. People on horseback would come and stick their head down next to the shoulder of the horse and look under the flap that would be opened up to the street, and on the other side of that flap would be one of the walkers cooking hamburgers. And the guy on horseback would just hold up the number of fingers he wanted for how many hamburgers he wanted. So that's pretty cool. Eventually, as time passed though, that turned into one of the world's first drive-ups, I guess?
Other people would occasionally drive up. They'd drive up to the in front of the cafe, honk, and raise their finger to indicate how many hamburgers they wanted, and drive on off and then come back later to pick them up.
So herein lies the challenge in telling the next part of the story. You see, there is the cafe, pre-Brownfield, where the older kids knew some of and worked a little bit in. Then there was Cafe like 2.0, which was after Brownfield, but still in the backdrop of the Depression. And then there was Cafe 3.0 during and after the war. And of course, I couldn't find a single picture of the place. So you have to use your imagination. Oh, and there is some discrepancy on just how many stools were in the cafe before and after the addition was added on. There was one thing, though, that they all did agree upon, and that was its general size.
This was a little bitty shotgun place.
The thing was just a hole in the wall was all it was. It was a fairly small operation.
You had just about this much room from where you're sitting to the wall.
Okay, so we all agree that the cafe was small, very small. Then there were stools where customers sat. How many stools? Well,
There was a big argument about it. I mean, all it had was stools and a counter.
Had either 12 or 13 stools, and that was it. You couldn't get over 12 people in there at a time.
We added 2 more stools, which made it either 13 stools or somewhere in that neighborhood. You know, like everything else, you try to remember what it was. Well, one store this year it was 14 stools. Next year, you tell it might be 15. But I'd say I don't think anybody ever remembered being over 15 stools.
First off, the first one we had was, I think it was 15 stools. It might have been 13, but we enlarged it. And we finally got up to 24 stools.
Okay, so people sat on stools. Surprisingly enough, I would take Carl's word on this. He not only worked in the cafe prior to Brownfield, but also ran the cafe alongside Geneva when Judd had a nervous breakdown during the war, which you'll hear more about soon. An interesting note on Carl here. He was suffering from narcolepsy when I interviewed him, a condition that makes you fall asleep at random moments. During the interview, he could get through about 4 minutes of talking before he just instantaneously zonked out. I would turn off the interview lights, he would sleep for a minute or two, and then he'd wake up. As soon as he woke up, I would turn the lights back on, turn the camera back on, and he would start talking at the exact same place he left off. And by exact, I mean the exact word he left off at, as if he never fell asleep. So he might look like the oldest here, but every time I asked him about the cafe, he answered immediately, as if it was yesterday. And he never spilled that cup of coffee, even when he was asleep. But let's get some more description about the cafe.
The front was a place where most of the cooking took place. There was a grill up at the very front. That's where hamburgers, hotcakes, steaks, bacon, eggs, whatever was cooked and served. And then behind the counter, they had various places where they kept the coffee brewing hot, had coffee all day long. They had places where they had big pots of chili, stew.
Chili and the stew was made in the back. We didn't have automatic dishwashers. We had big tubs that we washed dishes in.
Lloyd and I were relegated more to the dishwashing area than.
I always ended up washing dishes.
Several years after the cafe began, Dad put a deep fry in the back so that he could serve French fries.
But we kept it clean. We scrubbed the floor every week with lye water. Put lye on the concrete and brushed it down because it was terribly, terribly greasy. Grease floating in there.
We had to be careful because they'd order a bowl of chili and then empty a ketchup bottle by the time ketchup would be chili was cheap, but by the time they ate the crackers and the ketchup.
We put on the chili and the stew, and we'd always do the lettuce and tomatoes, and in those years you didn't get hamburger patties already made, so we had to do that too. And then we always had a pretty good breakfast run.
Dad would open up at 5 o'clock and usually close up around 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, sometimes 7. On Saturdays, we'd stay open till midnight if we had any customers.
Daddy made the pancakes. He didn't have a recipe, he just made them. Until yet, I cannot make a pancake like Daddy did. They were pretty, but he had pancakes and eggs and ham and bacon, and all of this was cooked on the griddle. And when we were growing up, when we ate at the cafe, he wouldn't let us have the ham because it was too expensive. We had to keep that for the company, for the paying customers.
Dad was the envy of a lot of people. The other cafe owners, they used to come over and eat lunch in Dad's cafe. So it must have been pretty good, but I never could figure out why Dad would always go home for lunch. He wouldn't eat his own cooking, he'd go home for lunch.
One of the things I was interested in was how the cafe and my family viewed and treated black people. I had never heard a single racist word out of my father growing up, and he always taught us to treat people all the same. I was curious about how the cafe served black people, if at all, and what my family might say about it. So I asked Carl and Rayford specifically about this.
No blacks ate in front. They wouldn't even come in up there. But we had places on set in the back. They'd sat back there and eaten. And I had more black friends than I had whites.
They'd come to the front of the cafe and either stand outside and ask for what they wanted, or they'd come to the back of the cafe. The cafe had a divider in the dishwasher and dishwashing tub. We didn't have an automatic dishwasher unless you called humans automatic. All of the maintenance activities took place in the back of the cafe, and they'd come through the back entrance into the back of the cafe and ask for what they wanted, and they'd be served.
Now it started to come together. Washing dishes. When I was young and the topic of racism came up, my dad would tell me the story about he, Rayford, and Garland would spend hours on end washing dishes in the back of the cafe, talking with black families who would be there eating. He knew their names, their stories, and they knew him. As far as I could tell, in his mind, black people were no different than anyone else. Then Rayford told me a story about Lloyd spending an entire summer working alongside a large crew made up of entirely black people. And though this has nothing to do with the cafe, I think you should hear the story anyway.
Lloyd came to school here at the University of Texas, roomed in the same dorm that I did, shared the same friends, and he was in school in the business school, and I was in school in the science department. The second or third year that he was here, I'm not sure about the timing. He decided that he needed to earn a little money. So every day on the way to class, we'd pass by Gregory Gymnasium, and they were digging a huge foundation hole out to the side of it. And Lloyd decided that it was close enough to the dorm that he could work there. So he went over to the foreman and asked if he could work. And the first response was just being totally rebuffed. The guy told him there's no way, that they used union labor, that they used experienced people, and that he wasn't the right color. So Lloyd left. The next day he went back by and he noticed that they were still working, and so he asked again. And he did that for I don't know how many days, but several days. Finally one day he walked by, and hot, dusty. The foreman was standing out there just with perspiration just pouring off of him. And Lloyd looked at him. He went on over to the dorm and he got an ice cold Dr. Pepper. And he walked back over and he stopped in front of the foreman and he said, "Mister, do you like Dr. Peppers?" And the man said, "I sure do." He gave him the Dr. Pepper and the man gave him a job. And so he helped to build the expansion on Gregory Gymnasium.
There we go. Now it's kind of all coming together. You see, when you spend time working and working hard, alongside anyone, man, woman, black, white, I think the differences kind of fade away. And you can't help to see people, well, just as people. But let's get back to the cafe, specifically food and prices. When we talk about food in the 1930s, it's important to understand the importance of hot food. This was at a time when many people still didn't have electricity, so the act of making a hot breakfast or lunch involved starting a real fire, either an open fire or in your wood burning oven. Yes, a wood burning oven. And in a Texas summer heat, starting a fire in your home was probably the last thing your family wanted. So getting hot food, local and quick, was a real treat, if you could afford a hamburger that cost 5 cents.
The stew was different than we'd make it now. Daddy used meat, big lima beans, onions, potatoes. There was no tomatoes, none of the other vegetables that we would put in soup or stew today. Every once in a while, people that would come in and order stew, we'd want Daddy to put a little bit of chili grease on top of it, and that made it good.
Hamburgers were a staple. They served a lot of other things, but we were best known for chili and hamburgers.
We had hamburgers, sandwiches, steaks. We had round steak and T-bone steak. And every so often we had chili and eggs. People would want scrambled eggs with chili in them.
And at times we served roast, hot tamales.
We did a lot of ketchup. Everybody wanted ketchup.
The food was very cheap. Hamburger was a nickel or a dime, depending on what you wanted. A bowl of chili was 15 cents. Irish stew was 25 cents. Bacon and eggs 35 cents. Ham and eggs 35. We served two different kinds of steak. Round steak and T-bone steak. It was a pretty good sized chunk of meat, and that cost 50 cents.
You know, business wasn't, not just in the cafe, business wasn't good anywhere. There wasn't any business to speak of.
Walk to work every morning at 5 o'clock and stay down there all day. And if he took in $2 or $3, that was a big day. And sometimes on Saturday we'd even take in $5, and that was really a big deal.
Let's take a quick pause here for a moment and recognize that $3 a day in 1940 is worth $70 today. That'd be like you raising a family of 7 on $70 a day. That's pretty incredible.
He didn't have a cash register. He had a cigar box that he kept the change in, and had a little cubby hole up in one of the cabinets there where he kept the bills. We didn't get many bills in. He'd bring the money home at night and dump it out on the table, and we all had fun counting it.
It was real handy for Carl to put it in his pocket. So every night when we'd go home, I'd make Carl empty his pocket so I could see how much money he put in them before he got home. During the war, Daddy had a nervous breakdown and was in bed and could not work. And Carl and I ran the cafe. And Carl was a pretty good chili maker too. But we'd get up and go to work. And I was living at home then. Mother was taking care of Sandra. And he and I would go down there every morning. So we were the two that ran the cafe for a long time, until after the war. When the boys would come home, George was in service and Carl had not gone at that time. And when they'd come home, they'd help a little bit.
Even after I left home, I remembered the cafe as being just a few customers a day. Didn't see how it even made ends meet. But then I guess the big change in the cafe was during the war, because Mother would write to me and tell me that people were lined up all the way down at the corner. We were about in the middle of the block, and they were lined up all the way down at the corner waiting to get in. And I just couldn't imagine things like that. It didn't, it just didn't make sense that there'd be that many people wanting to get in there.
People would come in, they'd actually stand behind whoever was seated at the counter until they vacated a particular stool. And I've seen the situation where there'd be 2 or 3 deep behind the people at the stools and people waiting outside to come in and eat.
But good grief, I've seen them lined up from where the cafe was to Main Street was a little over half a block. And I've seen them lined up all the way to Main Street and down.
I got to come home on a leave one time, and I told Dad, I said, Daddy, I'll cook for you today. He said, no, son, that's all right. You don't realize what it's like now. And I said, sure I do. I know. I'll do all the cooking today. Well, he finally said, okay, you can start off. And so we started. And that day, the way you know how much, like how many hamburgers you served that day, we had a big round can, we kept the buns in, and the man from the bakery would come over ever so often, check the buns, and be sure it was full. Well, that night I did cook all day, rubbed blisters on my hands, and that night Dad said, "Well, son, do you know how many hamburgers you cooked today?" I said, "No, too many." He said, 1,200. 1,200 hamburgers, and they'd gone up to the dime then. So I really made some good money that day.
Mother could take orders from everyone who was there, never write them down, and never miss an order. And if you ask her later on in the day what she had served to someone, she could recall everything that she had fixed for every person who had come in that cafe.
Speaking of mom or grandma to me, you can't really talk about her without talking about her pies. I never got to taste one of the epic pies my grandmother made, which I'm only slightly bitter about. But nonetheless, if you wanted a slab of one, as Rayford will call it, before they were gone for the day, you would have to get to the cafe before noon.
But they got the idea maybe if she made pies. So she started baking pies, and the way I remember it, that's when business started picking up.
Dad would go down and open the cafe. Mother would get up and start baking, and she would bake so many pies that you couldn't believe it. I would say that 25 to 50 pies were not uncommon.
She usually made about 40 or 50 pies a morning.
She had one oven. She'd bake apple, cherry, lemon, coconut, just a wide variety.
She brought those pies down to the cafe in a car. I had, in 39, a year or so before I left home, I finally bought a car. 2 years old, 1937 Ford, completely loaded. That meant radio and heater. That's the only thing you could get on it then. And I was having to pay $17.50 a month for that car. Well, when I did leave home, well, I left the car there for Mother and Dad.
Little pieces of wood that they used as shelves to carry the pies back to the cafe in. And they'd drive back down about 10 o'clock in the morning and stock the place with pies.
And in those days, you sold your pies for 10 cents a slice.
When you asked for a piece of pie, you didn't get just a small slice, you got a slab of pie.
You'd slice the pie in 4 pieces. And I remember it was 10 cents a slice. You know, if you bought the whole pie, you get it for 35 cents.
When they left in the evening, every piece of pie was gone.
So now we come to what might be the whole point of this entire documentary: Judd Walker's legendary chili.
Dad started making chili as a part of the staples in the cafe early on, and it became very popular. It was an excellent chili. In fact, Carl still makes chili for the family every year at Christmas time.
We served a tremendous amount of chili.
And my dad used to say that if he ever made 100 pounds of chili and sold it in one day, that he was going to close the cafe. He did that several days before he actually closed the cafe.
98 pounds was the most he ever cooked one day. And I cooked 166 pounds.
And it was, like I said a while ago, it was the envy of a lot of people. He was known all over that part of the country for chili, stew, and hamburgers. That was the 3 main things.
All right, that's a lot of chili. At that rate, the cafe being open 6 days a week, every person in Quanah, Texas in 1940 could eat a pound of Judd's chili every month. Anyway, without further ado, I now present to you Judd Walker's full official chili recipe told by his children. So get out a pen and paper.
my dad's chili recipe is consist of like
Well, let's see.
You'd grind up chili peppers,
Was suet to begin with in a little bit of water.
10 pounds of chili meat,
30 pounds
4 pounds of beef.
2 pounds of tallow,
You take 1 pound of fat.
He would put the suet in and let it more or less melt.
It was never 3 teaspoons.
a handful of peppers,
About 3 handful of ground chili peppers.
10 handful of chili peppers.
Then he would put in chili pods that we had ground on with a grinder by hand.
then he used garlic. I don't know how much.
And he didn't use a lot of water.
Dad's chili recipe was a great secret. I'll never tell.
And we'd put in garlic.
And like I said, it all depends on
Camino seed,
Then he'd put in chili powder and comino seeds.
pepper
and chili powder, paprika.
Morton chili mix. There's no telling how many thousand pounds we use. I still got some of it.
It was
It was mostly just the meat.
and salt and pepper.
But our chili took at least 3.5 hours to cook.
And that was Daddy's recipe.
And I have the recipe, and I've made it many, many times, but I would have to go back to the recipe to really even come close to what it was.
Well, there you have it. Good luck. Thankfully, Judd's chili recipe has been preserved in his own handwriting. Maxine still had this piece of mail from her father, dated February 24th, 1967. Enclosed within, in Judd's own handwriting, is his chili recipe. 5 pounds meat, 1 pound fat or tallow, 4 teaspoons chili powder, 1 teaspoon paprika, a pod of garlic, 1 teaspoon cumin seed, 1 handful chili pods ground, 1 teaspoon salt, 1 quart water, cook slow, like 3.5 hours slow. A while back, I made this recipe. It was good, real good. I mean, what's not to love about a chili recipe that at a minimum is 20% pure fat? Delicious. A warning here though, if you eat this, eat it for lunch because you will not be hungry for the rest of the day, especially if you empty a bottle of ketchup on it, but I wouldn't recommend that. The next question that needs to be answered is, just how legendary was this chili? Well, as it turns out, if we would have known just how good it was, none of his kids or grandkids might have ever had to work again.
used to be a wholesale grocery company there, Hooten Grocery. They sold to the grocery stores. They come and try to get Daddy to package and sell, let them sell is chili, but he never would he never would do it. He said I do remember him saying he was afraid he'd ruin his they might let something get old or something and it ruin his reputation, you know. So he wouldn't do it.
When I came to school here at UT, one of my first jobs was with the Department of Public Safety. And I had a coworker who went by the name of Wick Fowler. He was best known as a news correspondent during World War II. He was all over the Pacific. Came back and he lived here in Austin and worked with me at the Department of Public Safety. I brought some chili from Quanah a couple of times and served it to some of my friends. And he got so enamored with it that he started trying to duplicate it and actually asked my dad for the recipe. And he then took the contents of that chili and started packaging them commercially into a package that he termed 3-alarm chili. And 3-alarm chili by Wick Fowler is sold all over the country right now. It's not exactly like ours, but it's close enough that try it and you'll have some good chili.
First, a small correction. Wick Fowler actually made Dad's chili recipe into 2-alarm chili, not 3-alarm chili. But aside from that, Wick did package this product, which is not only still sold today, but he and Frank Tolbert started the original Terlingua International Chili Cook-Off in 1967. The idea was to settle a dispute about whether Texans or New Yorkers knew more about chili. Literally a two-man stunt. Now it is one of the most quintessential Texan chili events that takes place every year and has for almost 60 years. And 2-alarm chili kits, along with all the other variations made by Wick, sell by the thousands every week across America and the world. Ah, Grandpa. Oh well, you had the best chili ever, and nobody needed a competition to tell you that.